start a process today using a 1-2-3 method of making bread dough, which can be used to make pizza, focaccia, calzone, breadsticks, and other bread products. So the first thing is I have a cup, which is number 1 cup of warm water. And then I purchase some of this powdered dry yeast from my favorite store, Costco. It's a 2-pound bag, and I refrigerate it, and it lasts a long, long time. So with this I need the second, which is 2 teaspoons of yeast. And then I dissolve the yeast. It's warm water, so the temperature is probably around close to 90 or 100 degrees, but I usually put the water in the microwave for a little bit and feel the water with the fingertip to see if it's warm. Okay, next I have 3, that's the 1-2-3 cups of flour. And I find at times it's desirable to add a little bit of gluten flour. So I have probably maybe about a quarter of a cup, or maybe a little bit less of this flour. It seems that by adding the gluten flour to the regular either flour or bread flour, it makes the pizza dough a little more elastic and easier to work with. So the process that I'm going to use is first with a KitchenAid mixer, and second with the bread machine. So in this case, I add the flour to the mixing bowl, and then I start out with the paddle mixer blade, and turn it on low speed a little bit to mix the gluten and the flour together. Now, in addition to this, I add another 1-2-3 item. The first one is a little bit of salt, and probably the equivalent of 1 teaspoon or less. I am on a low salt diet, so I just add a little bit of salt. And then about 2 tablespoons or teaspoons of sugar. And a little bit of olive oil. And so I usually put this in with the yeast and water. And probably, if you were to measure this, it probably would be the equivalent of about 2 tablespoons. And then I put my salt and sugar in here, dissolve it. And gradually add it to the flour. little bit on the floor, I will wipe up. At this point, you can check and see what the dough feels like, and it's fairly soft and to the point that I want. If you think it's too runny, you can add a little flour. If you think it's too hard, you can add a little bit of water to it. After it's mixed, I switch over to the bread dough book. And I usually let this run for about maybe 5 to 10 minutes, depending.
So should we take a break then while this is happening?
Yeah. After about 5 to 10 minutes of this, then you can remove the dough at this stage of the game. Put it on a floured surface. And probably should let this rise for probably about an hour or maybe less, until about double in size. So what I usually do is I cover it with a dry towel and set it aside in a room temperature place. And some people at this stage of the game put this dough ball in a bowl, glass bowl, a metal bowl, cover it with olive oil and cover it with saran wrap. I find I can get about the same results just by doing it this way with a towel and just setting it aside, keeping it in a warm place, and it should probably double in size within an hour. Okay. The next process to mix dough, which I use, involves using a bread machine. I have a Breadman Plus, and this has a rectangular mixing pan with two little mixing arms. So you put these in place. And then I start out the same way as my 1, 2, 3 method as before, with 1 cup of warm water. That's my 1, 2, 3 method. 2 teaspoons of yeast. And mix it together. Very often, bread machine instructions will tell you to put all the dry ingredients in together, including the yeast. I get better results by dissolving the yeast in the liquid first, like I'm doing now. So I end up dissolving the yeast in the warm water. And then I put this in the pan. At this point I add a little bit of salt, even though I shouldn't have it. It seems that whenever you make bread, that a little bit of salt helps. And then pour in my olive oil. Equivalent of maybe 1 to 2 tablespoons. And a little bit of sugar. Sugar seems to help the yeast and allow the bread dough to rise. The next is the combination that I have is 3 cups of flour, and I use bread flour, or regular white flour can be used, and I add a little bit of the gluten flour that I mentioned before in the previous setup with the KitchenAid mixer. The total volume of flour equals regular bread flour plus this amount to come up to 3 cups of flour. So I add the flour to the bread machine. And plugged in. My bread machine has a different number of selections here. For example, white bread, whole wheat, fruit and nut, pizza dough, bread dough, and so on. So it all depends on the bread machine setup. I use it for pizza dough. I select the pizza dough segment, and what that does is mix the dough and allows it to rise in 1 hour. If you have a bread dough setting, in this machine here, the bread dough setting goes for 1.5 hours, and I think if you don't have a pizza dough setting, you could probably unplug the machine after 1 hour and have the dough ready for pizza at that time. So in bread machines, you can select the mode that you want, and it says 1 minute, 1 hour, and then you start. So what this will do then is that it will initially gradually mix the flour and the liquid together, and shortly after this slow interval that you can hear right now, it'll pick up speed and start mixing. And so I'm going to shut the camera off for a few seconds until the mixing starts, so you can hear the difference between the two. Okay, now the bread machine is mixing at a fairly constant speed, and you can check how the dough is coming along. And the mixing process here goes on probably for about 20 minutes or so. And then after it's mixed, then the bread machine interior gets warm and the dough rises. The next step is to use the bread dough, which has now risen for approximately an hour. So this is the dough that came out of the KitchenAid mixer, and you can see that it's approximately double in size. And over here we have one in the bread machine, which is just finished its cycle, and it's about ready to go, but I'm going to use this a little bit later, so I'm going to leave this in the bread machine to keep warm. Now the pizza dough that I have here, the recipe makes approximately 2 large size pizzas, and so I can divide this in half. Kind of form them into a little roundish ball. And then I have my choice of how to prepare this, in a pan or on a pizza stone. So right now I have a pizza stone in the oven, preheating to approximately 450 degrees. So you place the pizza stone in the lower portion of the oven, and you try to get it up to the temperature, as I mentioned, 450 degrees. The other method would be, if you wish to have like a deep dish pizza, instead of dividing the dough in two, use the big ball of dough, and you can place it in one of these pans that I find works well for the deep dish pizza. And this is a pan that has vent holes in the bottom, made of aluminum. And you would cover this with a little bit of olive oil or Pam, something like that. And if you use the full amount, and the pizza dough will rise up probably about the height of the pan here. So some people prefer a thicker pizza than a thin pizza. And this is the kind of pan that you would use for that. Now, this pan here is a steel pan, black coated, and I find that the steel pan conducts the heat a little bit better than the aluminum pan. So very often I will make pizza in this kind of pan. And if I use the pizza stone, then I use a pizza peel to transfer the dough onto the stone when it's reached the right temperature. So I'm going to show you both methods tonight, and actually the pizza stone method, there are two systems that can be used. One is that if you flatten the dough out and put it on the pizza pan, the peel, and you load it with the toppings and sauce and so forth, sometimes it's difficult to slip off. Some people like to pre-cook the dough for 3 or 4 minutes and then load it after. So I'm going to show you both methods at this time. Now, to arrive at the right diameter pizza, you can stretch this out and gradually work it into a circle. And you can use a little bit of flour so it doesn't stick to the board or your hands. If you're successful in doing this, stretching it, you can get it to come out about the size of the pan that you wish. And the pizza people like to throw this up in the air and catch it. So if you throw it up in the air, you try to catch it on your knuckles so it doesn't poke a hole through it. So try again. And what it does is the fall allows it to stretch as it hits your hand. But you can kind of do the same thing this way. So this first one, I'm going to make not quite as big as the pan here. And if you want to, you can use a rolling pin to, again, flatten it out, make it a little bit larger if you wish, if you're not satisfied with the hand operation. So this kind of procedure that you would use. Sometimes the dough will stick to the pizza peel, so you can use a small amount of cornmeal or polenta flour so that the dough will slide off a little bit easier. Okay, so in this case, the oven is not quite where it should be, so I'm going to wait a few seconds. And put a little bit of cornmeal using the system that I indicated. Now when you do that, the dough will tend to rise up and balloon up. So what you should do, if you're using this method, is to puncture it. And I have a little device here. You could use a fork, but this one here happens to be one of these holders for slicing tomatoes, and it does a nice job in putting little vent holes in the dough. I'm going to put this in, not quite now because it's not at the temperature, so while I'm waiting for that, I'll get my oven ready. And in this case, we'll use the same procedure. Sometimes people will kind of push the dough out around the circumference like that, make kind of an edge to it. So if you want a little pressed edge on the outside, you can do it this way. And the stretching would occur the same manner as the other one. And you use your knuckles to stretch instead of your fingers so that you don't poke a hole through it. And as I indicated, you could, if you want it just a little bit bigger in size, you use a rolling pin to kind of finish it off to get it to the right size and diameter that you want. Kind of like that. Now this one here can fit on this pan, so I like to put a few little drops of olive oil on it, and then I use a little corner of paper towel and spread the olive oil around. And with this pan here now, you can put your dough on the pan, and then you can begin to load it up. And you can stretch it in like so. Now, for the sauce on pizza, you can go several ways. I use a combination at times of a can of ready cut tomatoes and a can of tomato sauce, small can of tomato sauce. I mix the two together and I put them in a little pan and kind of let them cook together for a little while. I then add some oregano and pizza seasoning or Italian herbs, and I use that for a sauce. For a quick sauce, I usually use something like Newman's Own marinara sauce, and I also use, for example, this one, Classico oregano sauce, or organic and herbs and spices. And so either way, any combination will give you an adequate amount. And so tonight, from this one here, I'm going to finish the Newman sauce. So what you do is you spread it out. there are other sauces that you can put on here. For example, people sometimes use pesto sauce instead of tomato sauce, so you can try different variations. Now, at this point, I usually add a little bit of olive oil. Not necessary, but some people like it. And then I usually use some oregano. If I have fresh herbs such as basil, I like to use fresh basil rather than dry basil. And I have some of the pizza seasoning or Italian herbs. Now, at this point, you can put different kinds of cheese on the pizza. I use usually shredded mozzarella, but you can use provolone, you can use fresh mozzarella, and you can control the amount, a lot of cheese, a little bit of cheese. And now tonight I also have a little bit of cheddar. I'll put that on it. And for toppings, put anything you wish. Now sometimes people like anchovies, you can put anchovies, artichoke hearts, cut tomatoes, vegetables like thin cut zucchini. But tonight I have a little bit of pre-cooked sausage, which is a combination pork and apple sausage. You could use Italian sausage, and if you use Italian sausage, I kind of like to pre-cook it ahead of time. And tonight I have just a few little cut up Kalamata olives that I pitted and use those to give it kind of a little bit of flavor. And this is pretty much just about ready to go. So that would go in the oven. Now the oven is just about at the temperature that I want, so I'll go back to this segment here. So I'm going to put this on the stone probably for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll take a look at it and see what it looks like at that period of time. Meanwhile, the pizza should be placed kind of like in the middle of the oven rather than the top surface. So if it's in a steel pan like this, you put the rack in the middle, and I will deliver this to the oven shortly, but after I remove the other one from the oven. So we'll take a break for about 3 or 4 minutes. At this time, we're ready to remove the one from the oven, and you can see that the dough has risen and it's solidified a little bit, so it would make a little bit easier transferring then a loaded pizza onto the stone. So I'll put this back over here and go through the same process. In case there's any air pockets, you can kind of hit it again with a fork or something that will allow the air to be released. So sometimes if you use this method here, you can dip into a little olive oil and kind of brush the top surface. That's just one method. And in this case here, you reload it. already have olive oil in there. I skipped that. A little bit of shredded mozzarella. And a little bit of the cheddar. In this case, I'm going to put Mozzarella sausage, some thin sliced Italian salami, and it's all ready to go. So this goes back onto the stone, probably for about another 5 to 8 minutes maybe, and you notice it slides off very easily because it's partially cooked. Now while we're waiting for the pizza to be done, take this out and have you take a look at it. You see it's about the same size as the previous one. Again, if you wish to make 2 pizzas, cut it in half like I did before. And so this will make 2 large pizzas, thin. 2 pizzas not so large, a little thicker. And also 1 nice, really thick, deep dish pizza. So the dough can be used several ways. Now, I'm going to use half of this to make some what is known as calzone. Calzone is an Italian word that really means pants. Usually, calzone is a piece of pizza dough that has been stuffed with a different stuffing. So this happens to be a calzone device that forms it. I'll show you how that works in just a minute. And from past experience, about 1/4 of the dough can be used to make this calzone. We start out by making kind of 2 small circles like this. And roll it out so it's about this diameter here. Stuffing for calzone can vary. Tonight, I've pre-arranged a mixture of a sweet yellow onion, some cut up red, green, and yellow bell peppers. And use a fresh or frozen mix of peppers, and a little bit of the pork sausage, which I mentioned earlier, the apple pork sausage. So this one here is about the right size. You can test it by doing that if you think it's the right size. If it isn't, you can stretch it out just a little bit to make it fit. So that's kind of what happens here. And then you can depress one side like so. And this is the stuffing mix today. not quite enough sauce. I'm going to add a little bit more sauce on it. And tonight we're going to put a little bit of mozzarella cheese. And a little bit of cheddar cheese. All that cholesterol is good for you at this point. And then you fold this over, like so. And you bring this over, and you squeeze. And if you've done things right, remove the dough here from the side. Make things even, although it's not necessary. And there's your beautiful calzone. Now, at this point, desirable puncture a few air holes in top and place it someplace out of the way so you can get ready to bake it on the pizza stone. Or put several in the pizza pan. So I'm going to put this right here, right now. And I'm going to check to see how this pizza is doing. You can see just about ready. You can see the bottom crust. In fact, that's absolutely perfect. So I'm going to take this and move it over here for now. So we take the pizza out. Look. And I can see the crust on the bottom. I don't know if you can see that with the camera, but it's nice and brown. And this would be ready to consume immediately. So right now, I think I'm going to proceed and move the top shelf down one, and then put this steel pan in here and get this one started. Take another little break here while I put together another calzone. So if you want to shut the camera off for a second, and we'll get back to this in about 5 minutes. In the event you don't have a calzone making gadget, like the previous two calzone I made, you can accomplish the same thing in this way. So lay out your little circle of dough. And if you think you'd like to have a little more sauce on it, just do that. Transfer it over. Put your cheese on it. This together like so, and I would assume that probably a lot of restaurants use this method here, the one I'm using now. And then you seal it together with a fork fork sticks, you can dip it in flour. So it'll slide easier. It's kind of like a large ravioli. This is the setup. And you don't want this to pop apart as it's cooking, so that should just about do it. And so we'll be ready to put this in on the stone as soon as the current pizza is ready. So right now it's bubbling up quite well. So about 3 or 4 more minutes and that one should be done. The pizza that I had on the shelf, I moved on the stone a little bit to brown the bottom. But this is pretty much ready. And I'm going to place it over here to cool. Now regarding the calzone, so what I do here is I put a little cornmeal on it and I lightly brush the top. Olive oil. And then I place these on the pizza top. I forgot to move the rack, so excuse me a minute while I do that. And the back. Little cornmeal. Probably for about 10-15 minutes, I would imagine, so we'll check that shortly. It appears that the calzone are ready. You can take a look. So, nice and brown. So now we've completed the cycle, going from types of pizza using the same recipe for the dough, my 1, 2, 3 method. And remember that it can make 2 large pizzas, it can make 4 calzone, it can make 1 deep dish pizza, or you can divide the dough up accordingly to make smaller pizzas if you wish. Toppings can vary according to taste. Tomato sauce, pesto sauce, you can use caramelized onions, sausage, salami, anchovies, fresh tomatoes, fresh vegetables, all sorts of things. So if you can come up with a proper dough, making pizza can be fun for you and for the whole family. The person who is videotaping this, my son Rob, we started back in the 1970s. A Sunday evening treat was always pizza, and that was appreciated, especially since the pizza was really not too bad. So for the moment, ciao e buon appetito.